In this video, I want to show you what a week of weaving can do, and how you can keep weaving. What you see on the tarp there is how to set up plaid. That's a 16-inch wide backstrap loom that I have several colors of stripes with it warped, and I'm going to be weaving that piece with pink and aqua, which is going to make a plaid. So that's just to give you an idea of how to make plaid fabric. This piece is Red Heart Super Saver blue, single strand warp, double strand weft, and it came out absolutely beautiful. And with this piece I'm going to show you a couple of things you have to do when you're finished with a piece. So let's put this over on the rack. And you will see on here that there are a couple of errors, and those came up because it was just after the storm and I was outside weaving and the wind was blowing and it was... Now you also see a rigid heddle loom on the tarp there with the latest fabric, backstrap weaving, rigid heddle weaving, potholder looms, and these are the fabrics you can come up with. Here are the two shuttles for the plaid fabric, and here are some of the examples of fabric I've made. Dish towel or kitchen linens, backstrap weaving, potholder fabric, that can be crocheted together on the edges, beautiful potholders. Bigger potholders, Harrisville Design's Pro Loom. The loops are expensive. They make very nice large potholders. And more linens. Now all of these fabrics, including probably the potholder fabric, can be cut up and sewn into other things. Here's the light blue blanket you saw. All of these fabrics can also be block printed, and I'm going to be block printing images on some of them. So in a week I have a bunch of linens. Now let's go over to the big piece that I just finished. It's 30 inches wide, and you can see I think from here that when you end your weaving into the same line that you were working in, it may show up a little bit, and I'll show you where that is. And then there are two errors where I skipped, when I went through with the weft, I had the warp in the wrong position. Now, to fix those, and I can get closer if you want, you need a tapestry needle and the same color yarn, and you're really going to move this forward. You could make a sweater or a vest out of this fabric. It came out beautifully. Here's one of the errors, and you might be able to see that loop. I'm going to thread this, go about 2 inches back from it, and bring the collecting thread or yarn in this way, and line things up and then end it back. So I'm really redoing the rows with an extra thread. You will need to do that unless you have a perfect weaving. Now the light blue fabric came out with perfect weaving, so now on the bottom here you see how the fringe is uneven. I've already tied it off, but the other thing you'll have to do is just trim the fringe. And that's where a laundry rack comes in handy, because you want to make it easy. So when you take a piece off the loom, you need to check and correct any errors. Tie the fringe into equal knots, and then trim the fringe. So now, if I were going to make a vest, I can trace the vest pattern onto the fabric with chalk, stitch the edges, and I have my fabric pieces. So the batteries had run out. My point with this video is to show you with a simple backstrap loom, as you see there on the chart, or the wider one, which is the example of the fabric on the laundry rack, you can make your own fabric and make your own clothes. And you don't have to buy an expensive loom. A lot of the knowledge about weaving comes from reading books, which you can get at the library, and doing. Different heddle dent numbers will give you different effects. The dish towel fabrics you saw were done with a 12 dent heddle. This plaid is going to be on a 10 dent heddle. The fabric on the laundry rack was done with an 8 dent heddle. And it depends on the yarn and the project. So you do have to educate yourself to some extent, but getting a loom is very easy. On the chart you also see my saw and my gloves, and we just recently had a storm, and let me just grab the branch. These are two types of... the camera had run out of batteries there, and I actually have moved the camera in front of the fence there. That's a young white oak that I planted about 5 or 6 years ago. It's now about 30 feet tall, 25 feet, or maybe 30. And it's the tree I've taken the wood off of for my lucid. I only take a few branches, and only those that the tree doesn't seem to need for something. And I started to show you 2 branches that have fallen. If you look beyond, I don't know if I can move this, there are downed branches everywhere. You only see one there. Just beyond the fence, there are downed branches everywhere from the latest storm. And that is where you get your wood for a backstrap loom. So let me show you. I have Scarlet Oak, and I have Pinus rigida, scrub pine is how a lot of people call it, but it's Pinus rigida. So this is the Scarlet Oak, and I have a very simple carpenter saw, basic saw. Out of this I can get either 2 front beams, I can get knitting needles, I can get all kinds of stuff. I can get shed sticks, I can carve shuttles. Simple carpenter saw, and what you do is you cut it into pieces you think you're going to use, throw them, well, you would remove all the lichen off of this. These little branches, this is Scarlet Oak. If you, even though right now they're a little bit flexible, if you cut this little branch off and bleach it, you're going to soak all your pieces in a bleach solution diluted with water, then let them completely dry. You have oak knitting needles, double points. I mean, there's at least 2 pair of double points on this one branch. But the main thing is beams for backstrapping. So here's the pine branch. Cut it right there. And I've got short back beams. It's about another 1.5 feet long. The one side branch is big enough to be front beams. Don't worry if they curve a little bit, they'll hug your waist. You can use those for front beams. It's very, very simple with this kind of a saw. Plain old carpenter saw. Kevlar gloves so you don't cut yourself. And in fact, if you look at the loom I'm using right now, that back beam is made out of 2 sections of my pine tree that I grew. And it did look a little clunky. It's improving as I use it and carve it and do things with it. Very simple to make a backstrap loom. The 16-inch heddle I have on there, that is an Ashford 16-inch heddle. I paid $32.50 at the woolery. That's the big expense of a backstrap loom. And you saw the fabrics. You saw how wide it's practical to go. It's about 32 inches, 36 inches. You saw a rigid heddle loom if you have a table space. Pot holder loom if you don't, and you crochet them together. You can make any kind of fabric you want to make with simple weaving skills. Now one more thing I want to tell you and show you before I end the video. You can see that that warp is very bright, and I have already started weaving. I'm using the 2 colors of aqua and pink. I'm doing 10 rows of weft for each color and then switching colors. I may add either a 2-row line of red or yellow. I'm not sure yet. But when you look at plaid woven fabric, when it's finely woven, it all blends into plaid. This is almost looking like what is called a warp base weaving, even though it's a balanced weave, because nothing is going to subdue that pink and aqua in the warp. Even though I'm using the same pink and aqua in the weft. The weft gets broken up into little dots. It's not going to be enough to subdue your bright colors. I did this on purpose. This is actually a reminder of a trip my family took up to New Hampshire when we got like 8 feet of snow for Christmas. It was, and so this, the colors, the fabric, that's why I'm making this. It is plaid, and yet it's going to look striped. So you want to take those things into consideration when you set up your warp for plaid. You could also not make them more or less even strips. Like the black is only a couple of warps wider than the brown. I could have made both the pink and the aqua like 3 warp threads instead of they're each 9. I wanted it even. I wanted this wild, wacky fabric. Technically it's plaid, but it's not going to look like your average plaid. Now the other thing, I'm going to put the loom on, and I'm going to show you something. When you buy a heddle, it's not only the dents you want to look at. You want to look at the way each brand makes the eye that the yarn goes through. I generally use cotton warp, which slides very easily. This is Red Heart Super Saver Acrylics. It's a worsted weight. Some of the colors are a little bit thicker than others. And this is an Ashford heddle. And you will see that this is very tight through this heddle. And what it can lead to is the yarn sticking, and you may end up with more errors. So look into that. And also, my rigid heddle loom, the Harrisville Design, the eyes on their heddle are very much more open, and so worsted weight yarn moves much more easily through there. So I'm going to put this on, and I'm just going to show you a couple of weaving lines that I'm doing, and you'll see almost the stiffness of the warp through the heddle. So you can see it's sticky. It's almost too thick for the heddle, and yet it's worsted weight yarn. So I find I have to move this back and forth to get the shed to open up. And if you're not paying attention or you're reading fast, what can happen is that you'll skip a warp and get an error. And see how these are a little bunchy? So even with tight tension on the belt, so it's important to look at all the aspects of a heddle before you buy one. And over here it's bunching up because it's thick. But a sport weight yarn on this loom would work beautifully. So before you invest a lot of money in any loom, make sure you really look at what they're offering you. And then have fun.